Hello and welcome to the Trusted Advisor, a channel-focused podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. I'm Jim Roddy, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us. This pod and video series is designed specifically for point-of-sale resellers and software developers, and our goal is to educate you on the topics of technology, leadership, management, sales, marketing, and other small business best practices. Before we begin, I have to share a note with our faithful listeners that we're back. Right? This is our first podcast since April 17th when we talked to some Canadian resellers about how they're navigating the COVID-19 crisis. Now, we didn't intend on going nearly 2 months between episodes, just like I didn't intend on going 3 months since getting my haircut. For those who are watching this on video, that was probably kind of obvious to you. But we had some external issues. So first, a lot of guests weren't available because of the COVID crisis and because a lot of them scaling back their staff. They just didn't have a chance to talk. And then also some internal things going on. The RSPA published an addendum to our 2020 POS channel KPI study. We were fortunate 99 members shared their data, and we spent a lot of time crunching that together. But again, the good news is we are back, and it's good to be back. And in our triumphant return, we're going to be talking with two special guests about the future of ISVs, of software developers. Our first guest is Jami Interdonato. He's the president of RPOWER POS, a restaurant point-of-sale software solution provider. RPOWER was founded in 1994, and Jami joined the company in 2004 as the vice president of business development. Jami's been active in the RSPA, providing education for resellers at Retail Now, and he's currently a member of the RSPA's niche and startup ISV community. And you might not know this, but Jami served in the U.S. Army in the early 1990s as a fire direction specialist. Jami, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for your service.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here.
And where are you dialing in from today, just so folks know what part of the country you're in?
Scottsdale, Arizona.
Wonderful. Well, glad to have you here. Our second special guest is Jeff Riley, the CEO of Retail Management Hero, a point-of-sale software designed for retailers. Jeff joined RMH in 2018, but he's no stranger to the IT channel. For 10 years, he was the CEO at Dinerware, and for 5 years prior to that, he was the GM of the Business Solutions Division at Microsoft. And like Jami, Jeff has been active in the RSPA as a presenter at both Retail Now and Inspire. He's a past co-chair of the Education Committee. He's also a member of the ISV community that Jami is. And drum roll, please. He was the drummer for the RSPA Jam Band at Retail Now 2013. Jeff, it is always great to cross paths with you.
Thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Great. And where are you dialing in from today?
I'm at my home office in Edmonds, Washington.
All right, wonderful. So we've got the Northwest and the Southwest covered for this, and I guess let's rock and roll. And before we dive into the future of ISVs and their channels, we have to talk for a minute about the COVID-19 crisis. And so I'm curious, how did it impact your organization, for what you're willing to share from a public standpoint? And then also, what actions did you take to protect your business and your resellers? Because both of you have a very strong and robust reseller channel. Jeff, if you could answer that question first, because I know RMH has an international presence beyond North America, so you might have felt the impact first. So I guess if you can answer the question first, please.
Sure. Most of the people in our company and throughout our partner community handled the pandemic in a really level-headed and matter-of-fact way. For our company, our employees work from home already. We're a virtual company, so the impact on our day-to-day work environment really wasn't that different. Our business is very international. So one thing I observed is that whenever we got onto web calls with partners, we would compare notes for the first 5 or 10 minutes of every meeting and just what's going on in your part of the world relative to the pandemic. And that kind of gave us a sense of community, like we all felt we were in this together. And to hear notes from different parts of the world was really insightful, interesting. Our market is comprised of a lot of different types of retail businesses. So it was really different how the pandemic affected different types of retailers, like grocery and liquor stores have never been busier. But other stores like apparel stores and cosmetic stores were kind of shut down, and some are fighting for their existence. Our revenue was definitely impacted in April. But overall, the immediate short-term impact has been far less than I would have expected. We really don't know what the future brings. We'll see what happens this summer and throughout the economic recovery period, which is really one of the biggest challenges of all, is the uncertainty that this creates in terms of the future of the business.
Got it. Now you had that diversification where you were in apparel, which was down, but you're also in, like you said, the liquor, that was up. How about from a reseller standpoint? Did you have resellers who were in that same boat as well? Some were all dedicated to apparel and they really struggled, or do you have folks who were more balanced than that? If you don't mind sharing, how did they roll with it?
We definitely have reseller partners who focus in some verticals more than others, but very few are exclusive to one vertical. And so we did. I think that this has impacted our resellers differently as well from that perspective. And one conversation with one of our resellers, he said, Jeff, I feel like it's really important for us to have a future strategy around some of the more essential retail verticals, which has stimulated some strategic thinking on his part to enhance our product and take it into the cannabis vertical.
Got it. Interesting. We'll have to connect on that after the call because I spent last week helping moderate and as a panelist for the 420 MSP Managed Services Providers Cannabis Tech Conference that was held virtually, and really see that as an emerging market. So we'll have to connect offline. So, Jami, can you talk about RPOWER? How did they handle the COVID-19 crisis? And then your resellers, and you've got everybody focused in the restaurant vertical. And so while that a lot of those took a hit as well. What happened with you guys? What story would you share?
I would echo a lot of the same sentiments that Jeff put out there. Is first and foremost, it was we have a weekly webinar call with all of our resellers, and it was about providing resources, getting resources, really everybody sharing with one another what's going on in their community, in their area, what steps they were taking to try to help out the customer base, and seeing what you can do to just help improve or be there or be available. So that was number one, first and foremost. Unlike Jeff, our office, we do have 95% of our people work from our office, which is now quite the opposite. We have gone almost completely virtual. So now I have a bunch of extra office space if anybody is interested. But for the time being, it's actually worked out really, really well. Fortunately, most of our employees were able to make a transition pretty seamlessly. Some of the different pieces with collaboration tools, whether it's a GoToWebinar meeting or GoToMeeting or Zoom, whatever the case, we've obviously gotten a much more experience with just from a day-to-day standpoint. As far as the bars and the resellers out there, is definitely the restaurant industry has been impacted pretty heavily in a variety of different ways. A lot of it, I would say, first and foremost, is to your traditional table service, dine-in type establishment. That group has been extremely impacted. On the flip side of that, a lot of groups in the counter service, quick service, to-go delivery space, just like the grocery and liquor space, seeing the opposite. They see a spike in business. So different areas and different verticals we've had to treat differently. So in the to-go delivery space and even some of the, if you will, in-house dining space that's wanted to transition to digital ordering, adding online ordering services, both community and privatized, has been a priority for us. And then in the other spaces where customers have been down, they know they're going to be down in a nightclub environment or in a fine dining environment. It's been about pulling the resources together, doing maintenance, preparation, getting ready to reopen, and how it is that we can help them expose themselves to the community, to their customer base in a digital presence way, whether that's helping them out with social media type stuff, whether it's helping them out with marketing, whether it's helping them out with looking at revenue models for them and how they can help change, or what we can provide different technologies for different parts of their business, just simply to help them stay in touch or stay in contact with their consumer while they're not able to really interact with them. So.
Got it. And that's what it seemed like, whether you're an ISV working with your resellers or a reseller working with your merchants. There was just a point of where you had to provide guidance and information, like you weren't even thinking about sales at that point. I guess first Jeff and then Jami, is that kind of how you saw it? That was kind of the role that you were playing these last few months when, as the pandemic really hit and shut everything down?
Yeah, it really takes you out of the day-to-day sort of grind of, following up on your sales opportunities and your pipeline, because a lot of our partners' pipelines just dried up altogether overnight. So the key for us with our partners has been to remain engaged. And I can talk a little bit more about what we've done during that period. But for likewise, what we encouraged our partners to do, and I think they just naturally did this on their own. They didn't need us to encourage them to do this, is to reach out and engage with their customers, find out who was open, who was closed, find out what the impacts are, find out what we could do from a technology perspective to put ourselves in their shoes and really understand what the challenges were they were going through. A lot of cases for retailers, that meant reconfiguring their business processes to enable things like curbside pickup. So yeah, just be engaged and understand what can be done to be of service to them during this time frame.
Got it. Jami, what would you add to that?
Perfect. Communication is king. Is constant communication, is taking the opportunity to find out exactly that, who's open, what their motives are, what they're trying to change. Are they, for both to the VAR community, how we can help them out? Is there information we can provide for them? Is there additional support we can provide for them? Partners maybe in space that we can provide. We had one group that we ended up helping out and linking up a plexiglass manufacturing company. So they could go in with their counter service customers and help them become an installation arm for plexiglass. So, but first and foremost, and again, I think it's true in any type of business, is communication, communication, communication. So just being a resource, being available, providing information, bringing the community together from a VAR standpoint. And then also, just as Jeff mentioned, is VARs are pretty in touch with their customer base. It's what they do, and encouraging them to keep staying in contact, finding out what the needs are, how they can help, how they can be assistance. Was the first and foremost piece. And from that, you respond and react from there.
Got it. Thank you for that. And so let me ask you both this. So, I'm curious how you see the new normal playing out. And I have to say, on our last ISV community call, I had one of our members send me a message through the chat that said, like, you should give me $1 every time you say new normal, and I'd be a very rich man. And that's true. And I'm going to say it a bunch of times here in this question as well. So, how do you see that new normal playing out? First, Jami, in restaurant, like, what do you see as permanent changes to our channel in general, and then to your vertical after COVID is behind us? So first, Jami, about restaurants, and then Jeff about retail. But again, if you could both start your question about just our channel in general, what do you see going forward in the new normal from a technology business standpoint? How are folks going to come out of this? What's going to be different?
I think the new normal in the restaurant technology space is everyone having the omni-channel approach when it comes to ordering, whether that's mobile-based, digital-based, catering sales, right? It is having every revenue center available to a restaurateur. That's one side of it. The second side is also in the payment engine space. So for instance, the ability for customers not necessarily just to interact to send an order in, but how do they do curbside? Right? How do they actually notify a restaurant that they're there? How can they pay for a bill without actually, handing things back and forth between the servers? So what type of contactless payment, if you will, is available to them? And what kind of self-driven payments can they do? So I think that's first and foremost from a technology standpoint. We've seen the advent of online ordering, obviously, many, many years ago, but it's seen today it's the way that almost every restaurant, if they didn't have it, is the only way for them to keep in contact with their consumer. It expands their storefront out, which is extremely important when customers can't come to you effectively. So that's first. And then the second side, again, is with the channel as a whole itself, is one, making sure that our channel is educated on the partners that we have in space. We have nearly 15 different online ordering partnership groups, all of them slightly different than one or the other, making sure that we're educating the community on what the benefits are and how they interact from a point of sale technology standpoint, what resellers need to arm themselves with going in, because they are the trusted advisor in that space. And it's a matter of when a restaurateur looks at it and says, hey, do I go the community-based online ordering route, or do I build something out on my own? What's the time frame to take that? What's the cost expenditures? And not just for today, but the long term and the ongoing. So a lot of that, again, resolves around communication of the reseller group, and then beyond that to the merchant, about educating them what technologies are in space and how it is that their point of sale can be an order management system, if you will, for them, rather than just a point of sale system.
Got it. You said about being a trusted advisor. I had an RSPA member tell me, if your merchants didn't reach out to you and ask, what should I do? Or if you called them, they didn't call back right away and say, what should I do? you're not a trusted advisor, right? Because
Yeah,
if they weren't asking you now, then they're not ever going to, or you've got a lot of work to do. So, Jeff, what's your take from a channel standpoint and a technology standpoint, the new normal in our channel and in retail in particular?
Well, I think as far as it relates to the channel and the channel is concerned, the need has never been greater for a trusted advisor and for somebody who's knowledgeable about technology integration to be a partner of a retailer who's trying to figure out their way in the world. This is all being driven by the changes in the business that, like Jami was talking about with e-commerce and omni-channel. I just think about grocery sales and online purchasing groceries online. I had never really purchased groceries online before March, but now I have, and the experience was actually pretty good. So consumer behavior has been peaked in terms of changing the behavior, which gives the retailers the impetus to follow consumer behavior. And of course, they didn't really have a choice. They had to close, so they had to find a way to keep sales going on. And yeah, a lot of people will go back to their normal purchasing behavior in the store, but a lot of people will change their behavior based upon their experience of having tried it now. I look at folks like Amazon and Alibaba and Walmart who are continuing to get bigger and bigger and have been seen as a threat by SMB retailers, but that's really not entirely accurate. A lot of those big commerce players are actually porting SMB retailers aggressively onto their platforms. In fact, 53% of Amazon sales are now coming from third-party sellers. So there's the new normal will involve retailers thinking outside of the box on what their merchandising strategies need to be across multiple channels, not just their own e-commerce websites, but marketplaces and other ways in which to get their products across. And that creativity, that opportunity to be creative and think outside the box and change their business really creates a different type of an opportunity for traditional resellers of point of sale systems, not just to be operational consultants in terms of how business processes can be automated with products that have been developed to support pieces of the business, but rather integrators of different technologies to add more and more value to the strategy of the retail business as it evolves over time. So I'm pretty excited about what the new normal looks like.
Got it. Okay. So you're seeing some opportunities out there. I've had some folks say that they feel that this was an accelerant. Whether if you were running a business that was struggling, it was accelerating the demise of the business. So that's on the one end. But then also in terms of things in the restaurant and retail space, we're going to go more online, more digital, and this just accelerated to do it. Like you said, Jeff, about folks changing their habits. I throw it out to either one of you. Do you guys see it that way as an accelerant, or maybe it is to a little bit of a degree, or things might calm back down to where they were? But I guess, are you seeing this as accelerating progress, for better or for worse?
I think it's definitively accelerating technology and how it is that technology connects consumer with the merchant. There's never been a more need. That was, I would say, the first impact that we saw to this was immediately for all of those groups that did not have a digital or an e-commerce present. It was, how do I get there? And how do I get there right now? Turn it on tomorrow because they don't have any other opportunity. So that was just the first step. And then once they got into the first step, and now that, they're now engaged in the e-commerce platform, it's the second step of, well, how do I keep consumer engagement going? And how do I drive towards me? And how can I use the e-commerce and the web platform more as a marketing engine, if you will, for someone to come in? So instead of driving the restaurant space as being, hey, you are a dine-in customer, now I want to pick you up as a delivery customer, it's the opposite. Is how do I market to you for a delivery customer and then drive you to become a pickup customer or an engaged dine-in customer? So I think the technology itself is a huge accelerant right now for us in what restaurateurs are trying to do. I think also there's a responsibility from us as the technology providers to do that in a way that we don't move them back, if you will, to the days of having 7 different tickets lining all over the place for each order, to now where you see 6 different online ordering communities. You have, tablet here, tablet there, consolidating that down so that you're creating a better management system for the restaurateur, not just from their digital presence standpoint, but again, the customer engagement side of it.
Got it. And Jeff, what are your thoughts on the accelerant before we dive right into all the main topic of the day about ISVs and their future?
Well, I think it is an accelerant for technology, and I think it's that way because any change in an industry is an accelerant in terms of how the business has to adapt to survive and thrive in the future. And so, by its very nature, that change that the pandemic has created is an accelerant in terms of how business owners will look toward technology to help answer those questions. Absolutely.
Got it. Thank you. And Jeff, let's stick with you and let's get to our main topic, which is the future of ISVs. And so, Jeff, start with you. If you were asked to give a State of the Union address for ISVs and their reseller partners, there wouldn't be all the pomp and circumstance of, like when the president does it, we wouldn't have you walk into Congress and everybody cheer for you. So you just have to give it right now. We're skipping through all that stuff. What would you say for the State of the Union for software developers? Like, are you going to say strong, shaky, scary, never been better, in transition? What would be your State of the Union?
I think it's an interesting combination of, on the short term, that there's quite a bit of uncertainty and maybe even fear that is brought up for a lot of people who are running a technology business about how we're going to make it through the crisis. But I believe overall as an industry, we've never been so well positioned for long-term growth and success. And it goes back to some of the earlier points I made about the need for integrated retail technologies just continues to grow and grow. The need for trusted technology advisors grows along with that. Omni-channel commerce is a new concept for many of our customers. And it's not just about implementing a system. These businesses need to have a strategy for growing sales and understanding how technology enables them to do that. As a couple of examples in the retail industry, Ulta, the beauty retailer, has an app that allows customers to virtually apply makeup to see how it would look on them. IKEA just acquired an augmented reality startup that allows customers to visualize home furnishings in their living spaces. These are not moves that typical retailers made 10 years ago. And so these retailers are starting to think about, how do we get more involved in our customers' life as it relates to building the brand and their experience into that consumer's life outside of the store? And how do I maintain top of mind placement so that when they think about buying furniture or buying beauty supplies, at IKEA or Ulta are the ones that they initially think of because they've made those innovations. So we're seeing a lot of disruption that has been caused by COVID and also innovation. And I think what we have to remember right now is that as far as technology is concerned, disruption and innovation go hand in hand. And so I'm really optimistic about the long-term future.
Got it. I feel like I should turn to Jami for a rebuttal, but you can agree if you want. It's almost like, on one side, President Riley says this, President Interdonato says this. So, Jami, what are the words? What's your take on the State of the Union for ISVs and their reseller partners?
Copy paste. So that's absolutely strong. Is the demand for technology in the hospitality space? I don't think has ever been higher, and the ability to pull all of that together to connect consumer with the restaurateur has never been greater. And the need for implementing and supporting that technology for today and an ongoing basis is the norm. And as you mentioned earlier, is the pandemic has just been accelerant for that in showing, I think, a lot of restaurateurs the fact that you can just build your four walls and if you build it, they will come is not really valid anymore. And what they need to do and how they need to engage and how technology can help them engage with their customer is paramount to their success from a future standpoint. I can tell you, we have a handful of groups that were in the midst of opening locations during the pandemic, and all of them have shifted what their, if you will, their normal build or their normal vertical would end up being based on the pandemic. To incorporate at least some level of whether it's been a drive-through component or whether it's been they've decided to minimize their actual consumer, dining experience space, to afford them a bigger opportunity for digital ordering or catering-based ordering or back of house or virtual restaurants. Everyone is looking at different ways to engage, and technology and the order management of that technology is paramount to them from a future standpoint. A lot of restaurants have fought, if you will, technology being part of their experience and tried to stay away from it to a certain degree. And this has been a very big eye opener to let them know this is the future for them, and they need to engage and they need to get involved with it.
Got it. So before I ask some follow-up questions, just 2 points. So you alluded to Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And I'm glad you brought that up and said it's not valid, because I've said for years, like, that's a movie, right? Just because it was said in a movie doesn't make it true. Like, Yoda isn't real, right? Just because that was in a movie doesn't mean, well, I guess I should just go ask this wise little, I don't even know what he is, kind of thing. And that's going to give me all the guy and say, you're right, no longer, if you build it, they will come. And also, you said copy and paste to what Jeff said. I guarantee, not to get political, but the next time the president delivers a State of the Union, the rebuttal won't be, copy and paste, agree with everything. That was said there. So I'm glad we can come to some agreement. So some follow-up things in terms of uncertainty and fear. How do ISVs handle that? Because I'd say almost every ISV that I've talked to, it's always some state of transition, right? You're either making changes to your software, the market is changing, or if you're just not making changes, then you're becoming less relevant. So I guess I'll throw it out to either one of you. Like, how are you handling the uncertainty and fear with software companies are difficult to run anyway in normal times, let alone with the uncertainty and fear? Can one of you address that, please?
Sure. I think when all else fails, the best way out of a predicament is to listen to your customer, and in our case, that's our partner. We have gotten together with our partners recently in a renewed effort to hold sort of product focus sessions, where the voice of our partners helps us prioritize and direct our efforts in terms of what we're working on to enhance the product set next. So, how do you deal with uncertainty and fear? You deal with it by leaning on process, and good process is to listen to the customer and follow the feedback that you get. So that's my simple answer. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, there's no substitute for competent people getting closer to a situation, right? If you're just going to guess because everything is foggy, you're going to end up with problems. So, and Jami, let me follow up on a point that you asked in terms of the different ways of engaging. Can you talk about now, I guess, the burden that is on you and your development team to either integrate with those new ways or come up with those new ways of engagement? Not to say the pressure's on you guys, but it seems like there's additional pressure for you to be able to keep up with all these things. How are you handling that? How do you see that playing out for you and other software developers?
There's always been pressure to add third-party integrations or add innovative technology and to constantly bring that to the forefront, as quick as possible. But you need to temper that a little bit to make sure that you get the proper feedback, you do the right focus groups, you see what it is working for restaurant groups, you hear what customers want or what they don't, right? So there's always a balance in pushing out new technologies with making sure you're doing it the right way, and you're hitting the masses, if you will, in doing so. At the same point, it's always been a hurdle, if you will, in development space to bring on new integration partners, making sure that they are the right partners, if you will, in space, not just for merchants, but for your customers and the resellers as well that they can engage with. So, going down the path of what new needs there are in the technology for the restaurant space is listen to the customer base, listen to the reseller group, and work towards that goal and do it in a responsible way. We don't make rash decisions, if you will, from a developmental standpoint. It's tried and true. Make sure you test the marketplace with what you need and what you want, and try to put it out in the best way you can.
Jeff, what would you add to that?
I don't know that I'd add a whole lot to that. I agree with it, and it's I think back to what I said. It's the voice of the customer is what guides us forward. I think that there are times that you have to I guess the other thing that software companies really think about is how to continue advancing the architecture underneath the product, because it's not all about features. It's also about form factor of the technology, and are we staying current, and are we using the best combination of different technologies to position us for the future. So there is some technical debt that has to kind of be proactively invested in so that you don't accumulate that debt. You don't create more difficulty in the future by continuing to just let the product become bloated and monolithic. So that's something that I might add to that.
Got it. Thank you for that. And let's pause here for a moment to let our listeners and viewers know that an RSPA membership has never been more valuable or affordable. The RSPA has expanded its VAR and ISV member benefits to include discounts on health insurance, HR services, office supplies, and shipping. Also, RSPA members now have access to a legal advisor, security advisor, and a VAR and ISV business advisor. That's all included in your annual RSPA membership, which for resellers starts at just $250 a day, 68 cents a day for these high-value services. I was going to say you have that in your pocket, but with everything moving to contactless payments during COVID, maybe you don't keep change in your pocket anymore. Maybe you're soaking it in hand sanitizer. Accelerate your success by joining the RSPA today. Also, thanks to our sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsors are Blue Star, Heartland, ScanSource, and Shift4 Payments. To receive the benefits of an RSPA membership or an RSPA sponsorship, email membership@gorspa.org. And finally, in response to the COVID-19 crisis, the RSPA has launched the Rsp Solutions Center, a new online platform designed to introduce VARs and ISVs to innovative solutions and connect them with the providers of these solutions. You'll find product details, videos, white papers, case studies, channel executive contact information, and more. To grow your channel business, Google RSPA Solutions Center today. Alrighty. Well, thank you for that commercial pause there. And let's jump into, I'm curious to get both of your take on the emergence of direct ISVs, because you've talked a lot about the challenges already. Let's talk about those, these small startups offering niche POS software or adjacent functionality, like some things we've mentioned, online ordering, pay at the table, digital marketing, loyalty programs. Should we view them as offering important innovations that are going to help our channel evolve, or should some resellers see them as a threat? Because a lot of these folks have direct relationships with merchants, then they bring everybody else along for the ride. So I guess, Jami, can you address that first? And then Jeff, talking about direct ISVs, how do you view them? How do you think the reseller channel should view them?
From a direct ISV standpoint and new technology, regardless of what that technology is, we talked a little bit earlier about the trusted advisor approach. And when new technology is being developed or put out there, I know recently, for instance, there's been a large push in customer-facing payment, if you will, for how it is that a customer can do some engagement. Resellers need to pay attention, need to, in some cases, partner with them. There are a lot of viable reasons why additional technology comes to the forefront is because of the customer demand for that technology. And so, yes, there's an impact to the reseller because you look at, do you bring them on as a partner, if you will, to help service the customer or consumer to their success? At the same point in time, expand the offering, if you will. You are in the point of sale space. You are typically the technology advisor, if you will, for your customer and your merchant base. It's impossible, if you will, for a VAR or reseller to be able to handle 100% of the technology needs across platform for a consumer. Making those additional partnerships is something that resellers and VARs should build on from a day-to-day standpoint. It's something there can't be just a singular solution that is that's meant for everybody and everything. It just doesn't work that way in the restaurant space. I always kind of use the adage that pepperoni pizza, everybody knows what it is, but I don't know that you ever get the same slice of pepperoni pizza at 1,000 different locations across the U.S. So in the same way with how technology is being used by a location is unique to that location and what they can do and how they build upon that. And that's where the advisor role comes in and where different partnerships play a very key role. So stay the trusted advisor, right? Stay in touch and in control with your customer, making sure they have the resources that they need. And then if that comes from a third-party resource, then so be it, all the better.
Got it. Jeff, your take on direct ISVs and how you feel about them as a software developer and how resellers should feel about them.
Well, I feel like there's a place for direct ISVs. That not every software product is meant to be sold through a value-added channel, and not every retail store or restaurant needs a sophisticated and integrated software package to run their business. So I think that like the world is very large with a lot of different types of businesses and solutions, there are opportunities that are very legitimate for direct ISVs. Tends to be the simpler the product, the simpler the business need, the more likely a direct ISV solution is going to be a good fit. A product that is doesn't require a lot of support or training, that can be deployed over the cloud, those lend themselves to being sold directly. Throughout my career, the history of my career, I've never seen any ISV in our point of sale market with more than 20% market share around the world. So I think that it's going to continue to be a very fragmented industry over time. And I think that the more you get into niche markets, the more likely the opportunity exists for these direct ISV players to make a dent and become successful. So, like Jami said, I think it's an important thing to look at through a couple of different lenses. One, to keep our eyes open on potential threats in the future, but also for opportunities. Just because an ISV sells direct doesn't mean they can't be an interesting partner to evaluate working with. They may have an integration with your technology that you represent. You may learn something from them. You may learn some things about how they're doing business that can make you more competitive. And so I don't think they're friend or foe. I think they can be either. And I'm kind of intrigued by some of the direct plays that have been brought to market in the past. And again, I think it's an opportunity for all of us to sharpen our tool set by taking a look at what's going on in different niche verticals.
Yeah, and I have to say, the way you started that answer, where you said there are some instances where it's better for a software to go direct, right, and a reseller is not needed. 10 years ago, I think in that space, that would have been sacrilege, right, for somebody to say that. I remember I used to talk to resellers, and they would say, if this software developer sells direct at all, I won't have anything to do with them. Like, that was the de facto stance. I remember a couple of years ago talking to a software or a reseller saying that if anybody sells direct, I'm not working with them. I'm like, I don't think you're going to work with anybody then, right? Because it's almost, he was looking for all sorts of different solutions. There's very few who do everything directly or do everything indirectly through their reseller channel. And it's just interesting that you're acknowledging, hey, there are some spots where this direct is the way to go. Is it hard for you to say that because you've been in the industry for so long and seeing how it's morphed? Or is it just like, hey, you got to roll with the punches, and sometimes at these lower tiers, direct, simple solution is what's needed? I'm curious your take on that, Jeff.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is just being accurate about what is actually happening and being objective about it. Just because something might not be in our best interest in terms of how it affects our business doesn't mean that it's not happening or shouldn't happen. And the more resistance that we put on approaches that might be competitive to ours, the more we have our head in the sand, the more we really do need to look at it and observe what's going on and why is it happening this way. And, what do I need to adjust? How do I need to adjust my business based upon the reality of what's happening? Maybe I need to go more up market because my value is going to be recognized by larger customers who have more sophisticated needs. Or maybe I need to be more efficient about how I sell and deliver solutions so that the direct sales threat isn't as much of a direct threat, because I can now show the best of both worlds, that I have an efficient delivery infrastructure as well as a personal services in a relationship that a local business person can count on being there for their IT needs. So I just think you have to be honest and objective about what's happening and what direction things are going so that you can continually adapt and adjust your business model.
That's a more mature approach than just sticking your fingers in yours and going la 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 la. Like, I don't want to hear what's going on. I want everything to be the way that it used to be. Because there are some folks who are longing for the past. And I had an old boss who told me there's no room in business for nostalgia. Right? You can't be looking back on those nostalgic things. You have to keep up with the times. Jami, what's your take? On what Jeff said there in terms of, hey, sometimes direct is the way to go depending on the application, and here's how resellers and ISVs have to adjust with that.
I agree with it. It's not only is direct sometimes the way that it needs to go based on an application, but it can also be direct as the way it needs to go based on a customer, right? Is that there sometimes need to be a direct ISV to consumer relationship to a certain degree, depending on what that customer's needs are, the size of the customer, the scope of the customer. Some VARs have the ability to deal with just their region, and by region I may mean 50 square miles, if you will, around where there are, versus someone going out through an entire state or a metropolitan area, and then regionally southeast, southwest, northeast, northwest. And an ISV can help out in a lot of those areas where you can pull your community together to help out and kind of be that centric force for a customer that is a nationwide or a spread regionally, if you will. There's also other cases where an ISV may have resources, if you will, to be able to do things in areas that there aren't resellers. RPOWER, while we do have a robust reseller community, there are areas in the country that we simply don't have a reseller representation. But nevertheless, there is a customer base and a demand in the area. And so those environments, you reach out and you try to see what you can do through the channel. I think there is a lot to be said in an ISV doing direct business or direct combination channel, where making sure that the reseller community is comfortable with the contracts that you have in place with them, making sure that their interests from a future standpoint are protected, as well as yours as an ISV. So keeping them comfortable with, hey, we want you as a reseller. You're a sales arm for our community. We expect you to be here for not just today or tomorrow, but many, many years in the future. And we're orientated to their success because they know that their success is our success. But just as Jeff alluded to, there are definitive needs in areas where ISV and direct sales definitely come into play.
And do you see, I'll stick with you, Jami, and then Jeff, do you see our channel becoming more ISV-centric because of these direct ISVs who are getting more involved, and then resellers developing their own intellectual property as a differentiator, like there'll be a hybrid ISV and VAR? Do you see that happening way more, especially as folks focus on specialty niches? Is that something we should expect? Is that something resellers should do, is start developing some aspect of their own software or some particular tweak to the software they're selling?
I think it's creating the need, if you will, for the VAR community to decide what they are. Are they a service and support organization, or are they willing to invest in technology? Jeff talked earlier about technical debt, and I'm well aware of what technical debt means in the software development world. Is you're building, floors 3, 4, and 5 when you need to rebuild floor number 1. So, there's a lot, I think, that as the future goes, ISVs, VARs have always tried to figure out a differentiator for them, for their customer. Some, based on their acumen, their skill set, have been able to, add on different products. A lot of products in our space specifically. I can name 2 or 3 different POS companies that started off as an add-on component to a current or a legacy POS provider that then morphed into a POS product. So it depends, I think, on the VAR, but it's making them forced to make the decision of what are we? Are we going to excel in the service support space and find the proper partners where we need to and go down a growth cycle from there? Or am I more interested in starting to do that niche startup and invest in something that gives me a little more control, if you will, the customer, or a separator in the market for a typical type of customer? And am I looking for the resources to get that from beyond niche to the next level, if you will?
Interesting. Hadn't heard it put that way before. Jeff, your take on the hybrid ISV, ISVs, our channel becoming more ISV centric.
I definitely see this happening more and more. In fact, at RMH, we are actively pursuing this as a strategy. As an example, we're encouraging our partners to develop market-specific solutions and niches so that we can be more successful about penetrating those verticals. We're doing that for comic books. We're doing that for thrift stores, health food stores, pharmacies, liquor stores, and cannabis, just to name a few examples. Developing software products is not for the faint of heart. So not just any reseller is advised to do this, but there are many ISVs out there with open platforms and good opportunities for these types of partnerships. And I think it's a very smart strategy for resellers who have development skills to give this serious consideration. You know, these initiatives, a couple of things to remember, these initiatives always start with a single customer opportunity and a lot of learning and hard work along the way. So it can be looked at as an evolution, not just a strategy, but something that can be built over time. So there's no big risk or upfront investment that may need to be required in order to pursue this type of a strategy. Also, it should be said that just having development capabilities doesn't mean you have to build a product. We have a lot of resellers who have great developers on their team and who have no desire or plans to productize their software that they develop. They just use those resources to support customization and integration requirements for specific customers. But yes, I do see this as a growing trend and an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, an ISV VAR hybrid doesn't mean you throw out all your other software and you develop everything on your own. It could be, like you said, those customizations, which makes the difference. And you don't have to sit and stare at your ceiling tile and go, what should I come up with? It's really listening to the customers, which you guys have alluded to before. So we're near the end of our podcast here, but I can't talk about the future of ISVs without talking about acquisitions. And so we've seen fewer acquisitions of ISVs as of late. I mean, there was a big run, well publicized, a few years ago with Shift4 and Heartland. I know, Jeff, you're familiar with the Heartland one, scooping up a lot of software developers. And we just did our RSPA KPI study. When we did it earlier in 2020, 23% of ISVs plan to acquire and 10% aspire to be acquired. In May, when we did the update, only 3% said they plan to acquire and only 7% aspired to be acquired. And so, you know, somebody told me a few years ago, in the not too distant future, all ISVs, not some, not most, but all ISVs will be joined by processors. But we're seeing this acquisition thing kind of stall at this point. Do you think it's just a temporary thing? Do you think that all ISVs will be owned by processors at some point? I guess, Jami, starting with you, what do you think of the channel should expect, you know, over the next 6, 12, 18 months in terms of ISV acquisitions? Gaze in your crystal ball and share with us what you're seeing.
From my side, and experience-wise, I would definitely agree that there's been a little bit of a slowdown from the standpoint of really it was Heartland and Shift4 making the acquisitions kind of obviously, you know, for a period of time. You know, a lot of tire kicking, if you will, right now in the industry seems to come from, or the interest seems to come from private equity in building up the niche ISVs to that next level or expanding upon that next level. So not sure, there are a few different groups that, you know, I'm aware of that are trying to do a consolidated approach for multiple different niches within a given vertical. So for instance, whether it's taking on, you know, a pizza product and then turning around and taking on a retail product and turning around. So having kind of a little bit different divisions within that software, you know, cycle, if you will. I would say that's the first area that I would look. I don't know that it's as much of consolidation by a singular, you know, processor, if you will, that's going to be acquiring a bunch of different products versus private equity investment inside of, you know, those niche ISVs to get them to that next level, if you will.
Got it. Jeff, your take, and I know you worked for a while, if I remember correctly, in the acquisition space. Am I right? Like you were helping folks get acquired or figure out how to do acquisitions, if I remember correctly.
I was between Dinerware and RMH. I spent a year with an M&A advisory firm, and so that was an interesting experience. And along the lines of M&A, I think that, you know, we did see a huge flurry of activity between, say, 2014 and 2018, and a lot of it was done by Heartland and Shift4. And I don't think you know, that was kind of unprecedented in that period of time. I don't think we'll see a run like that in the foreseeable future. But I don't think mergers and acquisitions will ever stop in our industry. I think it's just a natural course of what happens in business and the life cycle of small businesses.
If I can ask, why don't you see a run like what happened in, like you said, in 2014 and beyond? Why don't you see that happening again anytime in the future?
For one, a lot of those independent companies have been acquired, and so there's just a whole new fleet of companies that are just coming up now behind that. Companies like RPOWER and RMH and other ISVs out there that are at a different point in their life cycle. But also, if you look at the acquirers, they have kind of gone through their own consolidation, and now there's really three giant players in payment processing, at least in North America, that people are all familiar with, and I think that just the landscape is different about where these companies are in their life cycle. There was quite a bit more convergence going on between payment processing and point of sale during that time frame as well. We've kind of reached a level of maturation that we weren't, that time frame 5 years ago was kind of when it was all kind of unfolding and happening. So those are some of the reasons.
You're saying so those payment companies were looking for differentiators, and so some of them were acquiring software companies, but now that there's fewer payment companies, I would say there's less need to differentiate. But is that essentially what you're saying, is there's less of a race because there's fewer people to race against in the payment space?
I do think that way. I also think that a lot of that activity, if you remember back in the case of Heartland, they acquired, and Dinaware was one of the companies that they acquired, but they acquired Digital Dining, they acquired, I'm forgetting some of the names of the companies, but they did so without really a lot of people understanding what was going on behind the scenes. And what was going on behind the scenes is that Heartland itself was trying to make itself more valuable in the eyes of potential acquirers of their business. So they in turn got acquired by Global Payments. So the motivations behind doing this acquisition activity is in many cases to build value for the future of that company in the eyes of other suitors.
Got it.
So I think now that these properties are owned by a fewer number of very large companies, FIS, Global Payments, that in essence, what happens a lot of times now is the rationalization of internal product development efforts and product strategies that follows the acquisition period. Okay, now that we have these properties, what's working, what's not? How do we consolidate the teams? What is the right future product strategy that comes out of this? And companies like Microsoft did that with their business solutions properties, Great Plains and Navision, and all of these things have kind of undergone the internal assimilation process, and now have become fully embedded in internal product strategy and product group initiatives. So the need for acquisition of new capabilities is kind of past in some cases.
Got it. But we might see more of those private equity. It sounds like both of what you're saying in terms of, both of you are saying that we should look out for those private equities as well. It might not be consolidating all those ISVs, but it might be some other folks coming in and taking them over and trying to grow them up. So interesting. All right. Yeah, we will never stop talking about acquisitions in the channel, and especially in the software and the payment space. So I know we're running short on time. My last question for you, Jami, and then Jeff, and we ask our guests this from time to time. Can you recommend for our audience a book to read, an online resource to follow, or a podcast to listen to that would help them improve their organization? Jami first.
I'll give a shameless plug to RSPA, the Resource Center. You guys have done a great job for the community as a whole. I use it. I know a good majority of my reseller community uses it. But I would say, from an industry standpoint within our space, I follow a lot of people on LinkedIn, pay attention to LinkedIn and different individuals, if you will. There's a lot of great resources there. And then at the same point in time, the standards for our industry, and being whether it's the ETA or whether it's the National Restaurant Association, I will say for our merchant community and our online portal, we give them access to the RSS feed for Restaurant Business Online. Is one that seems to have a good bit just specific to the restaurant industry, if you will. So we pay attention not only to what affects us from a software standpoint, but also what affects our consumer, if you will, our merchants, right? And then last, just for for some personal preference. Now I know. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. It's just a daily tidbit of information. It's been an interesting, if you will, little cultural facet of information on a day-to-day standpoint, but nothing business related there.
Got it. Okay. Well, you have to have some change of pace, and you have to know beyond your business as well. So, no, thank you for that, Jami. Yeah, and especially if folks aren't active on LinkedIn, I can say from firsthand experience, there's a lot of great info out there. If you connect with a lot of folks in the industry, you'll see information that they're sharing. You'll get things presented to you that you don't know otherwise. Jeff, how about for you? Book to read, online resource, podcast to listen to that will help our listeners and our viewers become better leaders, better managers of their organization.
Sure. I've been listening to quite a few different podcasts, but I'm actually going to recommend a book that has been written by Christopher Connors. The name of the book is Emotional Intelligence for the Modern Leader, a guide to cultivating effective leadership in organizations. So this is a book that has been recommended to me by one of our partners. I have not yet read it, so I'm passing this recommendation along, although I can't personally vouch for it. But it sounds like it's a really relevant book in terms of what's happening in the world today with a lot of uncertainty and how to apply sort of these life skills that we hear about often in podcasts and other books and apply them to our personal and professional lives. And I find those to be pretty interesting subject matters.
Got it. And you able to share any of the podcasts that you listen to? That you
some of
personal,
the podcasts I listen to are more for entertainment purposes. I like Armchair Expert and by Dax Shepard. That's one of my favorites. And the Goop podcasts are kind of fun and interesting as well.
The one thing about podcasts is they teach you how to communicate, right? Because they're such effective communicators, and we're all in the communication business. So again, if you're not on LinkedIn, if you're not listening to podcasts because you're saying, I've never done that stuff before, it's a good time to adapt, and they're pretty easy to sign up for. So, well, gentlemen, thank you for that. And to our listeners and viewers, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. We'd also appreciate if you'd rate us wherever you find your favorite podcast. My personal philosophy is the more stars, the better, please. And if you'd like to learn more best practices for VARs and ISVs in the point of sale channel, check out the RSPA blog. You can find it at gorspa.org and then clicking on RSPA blog. Before we go, thanks again to Jami and Jeff for sharing their wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marcom Manager Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the point-of-sale ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, please visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.